In today's business world, change is the only constant, and mastering transformation is the ultimate key to success. Welcome to Shift and Thrive. I'm your host, Natalie Nathanson. Each week, we'll bring you conversations with CEOs who delve into how they successfully drove critical change in their organization. This show is sponsored by Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service B2B marketing agency. I am truly excited to interview today's guest. He's an innovative entrepreneur who has founded, led, and exited multiple companies in the tech sector, including being founder of QSecure, a company in quantum computing cybersecurity space. He's been a CEO, CTO, and chief security officer, among others. He loves working with people and teaches courses in IT, cybersecurity, and artificial intelligence. He's currently founder and CEO of UnPwnAble, formerly LinkTempo, a company doing some innovative work in data management and security. Konstantin, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
Great. So I wanted to dive right in, and we're talking about driving transformation. So I wanted to start by asking you, what is the biggest misconception out there about successfully driving major change in an organization?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So misconceptions are they really are situational, right? Depending on how the company is structured, it could be quite anything. Some companies are product driven, and the misconception with them becomes that that technology drives the market, which is not necessarily true, because the technology has to be adoptable. And the other one is, I don't think we pay enough attention to the customer and what the customer has to say. So that's another misconception, because we really drive towards what we believe. We love our ideas. We fall in love with our ideas because they're our ideas. And it's really important to actually go out and listen to the customer, make sure that it resonates with them, make sure that you're building what they want to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so true. And they feel related, right? So ultimately, you can have the greatest technology, but if it's not there to solve a problem and a real problem in the business, they're going to have a really hard time finding the right customers and building anything that's scalable.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. So you're talking about, listening to the customer and kind of paying attention to the market. Can you talk a bit more about that? And how do you think we, squash this misconception and help companies do this the right way?
Of course. I'm a big proponent of insights, and insights are those little tidbits of information, those little things that are sometimes unsaid by the customer, that really hit the core of what is needed. So we often look at data and process it into information. Data is raw, right? It's data is something that we receive, but it's not necessarily useful by itself, because you can have multitudes of data. You can have the same results interpreted a whole bunch of times. So we process it and we make information out of it. But information is only what's glaring and obvious to us, but insights are when you actually look at that information and you merge it with what else can you learn, what else can you observe. The best actually example I've been using lately is one I borrowed from some of my wife's work, actually. So she's a marketer. She studies what's been successful in the past. And one of the best examples is actually the Got Milk commercials. They used to be really popular in the US, but the interesting thing about them is they went and did market research. They found that that people regurgitate what they're told. So for decades, the milk industry has been selling based on milk is so nutritious and it drives this value and things like that. What they did was actually something very different and very unique. They went into people's homes and they started observing. looking for things that are not being said. And what they noticed is that anytime someone wants something, anytime someone wants some cereal in the morning, they'll reach for milk. Anytime they want coffee, they'll reach for milk. Anytime they want to make a cream pasta sauce, they'll reach for milk. And at the end of it, milk is became one of those things that if you don't have it, it's a problem. And that's the one that created that got milk commercial, the one that resonated so well with people, because what they realized is that what wasn't being said is that without milk, you're in trouble. And people will go out in the middle of the night to get it for themselves for next morning. But the same thing is true across the board. The same thing is true for any kind of technology. When you listen to what you have and you look for what else is not being said and drive those insights, drive that truly deep understanding, not only can you create that bond and connection to your customer, but you also inform the product that you build. You know how to reach your customer, and so many other things just become obvious to you when they really should have been from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. That's very true. I love that example of the got milk, especially because it can be easy to get lost in the complexities of a technology, and the example of milk, right, and something that everybody uses day to day. We can all kind of resonate with that. But bringing it back to kind of the technology, I think the way you described, right, what is not being said. We also, what we're doing market research on behalf of clients and really looking at, what is being said by the customer, but not currently being said internally. So it's not always talking about, the features and functions of a product and why the technology is so great, but it's really what are the problems that the customer has? How are they currently solving those problems? And using both that kind of qualitative analysis and, as you said, the quantitative data, and the combination of those, I think, is where the power or kind of the magic happens. So I like how you said that.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it is, I would say part art, part science, right? There's you need the data, you need the methodology and the framework, but then it goes into a bit of a black box to really get the right insights and the right decisions at the other end of that.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about, what is the biggest change that you've driven in an organization?
Sure. So I usually come into organizations to drive change, but I'll tell you about one of my favorite ones from a long time ago. So I used to run a networking services company. It was called iSpan. That was one of my early companies, and it was good, but it was we were working in a saturated market, and our growth was steady, but I would call it slow. It was hard to differentiate against other competitors in the market, and we tried not to heavily promote the sales teams. We wanted to build our company through reputation and continue to scale. And it was working for us. We were continuing to grow, but not at the pace that I really wanted. And so what we did was we actually recognized, did some research, looked for insights, looked for what we needed to do, and recognized that our customers were looking for a way to save costs, because at the time it was the market was crashing. It was back in 2008, and money became really expensive to borrow. So they had a hard time investing into future growth. And they were looking to see how they could tighten their belts a little bit in some ways, but also they wanted to continue to grow. They wanted to reposition themselves for that next phase of growth simultaneously. So for us, what that meant was we needed to really look at ourselves and see what we can do about our growth and our own transformation in response to that. And what we realized is we needed to place some investments. So our insight was actually that not only is it that the customers had specific needs, but also the insight was we actually had specific expertise to invest in a couple of different areas that were very atypical for a company of our kind and one within our industry. So we focused on three things. We focused on cybersecurity. We focused on building out data centers of our own, and we focused on large global scale integrations. And that was true because that worked for us, I should say, because we had expertise in house to actually accomplish all of those things. We were already an infrastructure company, and we already did a lot of integrations. So we pivoted and we looked at financial systems like Oracle Financials, Salesforce, and made that change. But we did it with security in mind, secure positioning, and being able to deploy. The other part of it was we recognized that data that customers owned, they didn't necessarily always want to go to the cloud. Sometimes they did, sometimes they didn't. So we figured out how to provide them with data center and colocation space that was very worthwhile. It allowed them to save costs and still reposition themselves for business growth. And what ended up happening for us is that by them co-locating their infrastructure with us, they were saving costs, but what we were getting is loyalty from the same customers, because now we were actually maintaining their infrastructure, whereas integrations tended to be a once-off business. Once you complete the integration, maybe you'll get some support business out of it, but it's not necessarily valuable. But being able to consistently service their needs and look after them really was transformative for us, and it allowed the two product lines that really don't seem to be compatible to actually build off of each other. And we ended up growing our business during those years by something like 300% year over year for the next 3 years, and we exited after that. So hopefully it continued to do well.
No, that's fantastic. I love that story. It's also, I think, some of the areas that you invested in, maybe fast forwarding now, 15 years later, is more commonplace in the market. So it really sounds like you were ahead of your time and were able to connect some of those dots and make the right investments. So I'm curious to ask, you talked about you started by looking at yourselves to start that transformation. What did you do? How did you get to those decisions that those were the right places to invest?
In some ways, once we uncovered those insights, it just seemed really obvious in so many ways. And I would say that a lot of the products that we tend to buy, we as consumers always ask ourselves, well, why didn't we do this before? Or we as people who build products, we ask ourselves, it's so obvious, why didn't we do it earlier? And the trick for us was really to see what it was to make it happen. And it wasn't an easy road, but it's still supposed to be an easy road. So it really worked well, but it was all driven by insights and understanding. The same reason as why I went into quantum. There was a certain insight and understanding of what's needed there, and what the problem was. And once you understand that problem space, and you get into the solutioning, things tend to jump out at you, and you see exactly what's obvious about it, where the gaps are, where the need is, and then you go and validate. And if the validation rings true, then there's nothing stopping you.
Yep. Yeah. True. And you'd say like hindsight is always 20/20. So you look back and you say, oh, that was obvious. And maybe once you got those insights, you're saying that it also became a bit obvious. But I'd love to hear a little bit more, like how did you get to those insights? What were the things that you or the people on your team did?
So we tend to ask a lot of questions, and we tend to listen a lot as well. But not only do we listen, but we also observe. So what I find is that when you start a discussion with someone, when you have a few loose questions that are open, it allows the person sitting across the table from you um, to actually voice what's top of mind for them. And people love to discuss problems, especially if they're engineers. Engineers, I think, thrive on discussing problems. Um, so for us, it was a lot of listening, it was a lot of understanding, and it was a lot of observing of what is not being said, and to really come back and think through what is it that hits, what is it that resonates, and then once you come up with the answers, once you bring everyone together, once you actually take the entire team through that exercise, you'll actually see a lot of contributions from all kinds of people, um, and especially ones who come in with a brand new mindset, ones who haven't dealt with this problem, because the last things that experienced people tend to ignore. And having that variety of voices, that diversity of opinions, is really meaningful. It's and the trick is to make sure that everyone has a voice as well, and there are tools for that. I'm a big fan of design thinking. Actually, the Stanford version of design thinking specifically, because it resonates a little bit better in certain ways than other schools, and it allows for all kinds of personalities to really shine. So, for example, introverts tend to be very quiet. They won't always speak about things, and they'll get shouted down by louder voices, by people who are more confident, or more outgoing. But by using certain tools, you can actually allow everyone to have a voice. And when you hear across all of those different voices, you can bring everything together. You can solution, you can prototype, you can validate and verify, and really come up with answers and see what works and what doesn't, and move forward that way.
Sure. I like that you brought up design thinking. One of my favorite classes in all my years of undergrad and grad school was design thinking, and the point that if you design for a very particular person, a very particular use case, you're solving for that problem, but you often are also solving for a broader audience. And one of the consumer examples I liked was the OXO brand that makes like kitchen utensils and things like that, and they solved for people with arthritis, and then found that by making the handles more comfortable for that population, they actually had a much more commercially appealing product. And now many people use that, and comfortable handles have become a go-to.
I know I'm one of them.
Same. You talked about, the bringing the team together and bringing them along the journey. I wanted to hear, it sounds like, I don't know if it's a cultural change, but can you talk a little bit about, what you did to kind of bring the team along for that journey? Because I think one of the things that I often experience is, and here is the leadership might be all on board because they've been working on this, thinking about it, but that doesn't always mean that that's going to translate, easily to the rest of the organization.
That's right. The top-down approach does tend to create a lot of inconsistencies, because the executives don't always see what's going on the ground, and the people on the ground tend to be very frustrated with the direction they're given because they feel like it's not led with understanding of what's possible, what they can do, and even if the solutions are right solutions. What the executive team can do, though, is they can understand a lot more about the market, and share a lot of their perspective around the company direction, growth, and things like that, and the customer, of course. So by bringing the teams together and having everyone participate in not only understanding the problem space, understanding the customer, driving with empathy, it's a bit of a mind shift for both of the audiences, actually, not just the engineer, not just the executive. It tends to when people engage in the same conversation. First of all, they get to see each other's perspectives, so they can understand what the executives will see, and the executives will understand what the engineers or problem solvers will see. And by working together on the solution space and really understanding how to address their needs, you also have the side effect of getting rid of egos. You get the side effect of bringing the team together. A lot of people um, will have certain feelings. They could be resentful of the solution that they're told to implement, but those barriers drop immediately when they're part of that solution, when the idea is theirs, or when they've contributed to the idea and helped grow it out. So you actually reduce a lot of the friction between teams, and you really align everyone on the same goals. So that's why I like that approach the most.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. I think that works best, and I really like how you talked about making sure everyone understands not just the solution but the problem space, and then the word empathy I think is really key, right? And it's the way I think of it. There's understanding empathy for the target market, right? And what are they going through, and how are you going to help them? And then there's empathy as a leader for what your organization is going through this change, and understanding what this change might feel like for them, and that depending on kind of the scale and size of the change, that's not comfortable for everyone, and needing to bring them along the right way.
Exactly. I mean, after all, what are you solving for if you don't understand what needs to be solved?
Right. Again, sounds obvious when you say it like that, but not always obvious when you're in the midst of it and navigating all the different components that need to come together.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you talked about, the executives, working together, and a little bit about engineering through this. I wanted to hear a little bit about, what other parts of the organization do you lean on through these kinds of transformations at different stages of the process?
I tend to lean across all organizations pretty heavily, because I'm a big fan of mechanical watches. All parts have to work together at the same time, and they have to do it well. Otherwise, you get a very inefficient timepiece. But everything is like that. I'm a big believer in cooperation rather than competition. I feel like with the right motivation, everyone can actually contribute, and contribute in a positive way. Nothing feels worse to someone working on a solution if they feel like they're alone in it, or if they're not being listened to, and the direction gets lost, because that could be a very important voice. It could be a critical insight that they can provide, um, that would really help out the whole team or the company, or the objective. So yeah, we encourage conversation. We encourage positive conversation, especially, or sometimes arguments, as long as they stay positive. And we incorporate all kinds. So engineers have wonderful perspectives. They can be very creative in how they solve. But product people and marketers tend to have an insight of the customer and really deep understanding of what the solution would look like and how to drive it. They need to be properly resourced, and we use program management for that. And hiring good program management is very important, because it lets you, it incorporates the financial aspects, and the resource aspects, capacity planning, and so many other things. And of course, marketing, by understanding the product deeply, they can actually go out and have a better message, better communication with the customer, and they can focus on how to drive customer loyalty, not just reach the customer themselves.
Mm-hmm. I like how you explain that. I am picturing kind of a Venn diagram when you think about who knows what across all the different pieces that need to come together, right? There's, marketing and sales tend to know the customer best. Engineering and product and marketing know the product best, but each of those kind of functions has a different perspective, and you really do want all those to come together, in to get to the right place.
That's right. And people are professionals in their own domain. They know how to solve those problems. So by giving them more tools to be able to go out and solve those problems, it just makes them better.
This is really great. I love where the conversation is going. And I wanted to hear a little bit too about your current company, UnPwnAble, and what are the things that you're kind of personally like focused on in the business, and are you trying to drive any change? Or I know the company's kind of earlier stage, so what are you building or what are you looking to evolve?
Sure. So in my previous company, we were working on quantum technologies and how to make data safer, make information safer, and how to look at it. I tend to take a perspective of the same watch perspective that I just talked about a second ago, because I like to see how everything works as a whole. Everything works together, and um, and by taking that perspective, I tend to notice a lot of gaps, a lot of problem spaces that really seem like they need to be addressed. And my big thing is I have to go and validate it afterwards, and ask the question of, is this really a thing, what I'm seeing, or am I just running off on something that's a shiny object? Um, and Throughout this process, I actually got to meet someone who was working in hardware. They spent their entire career in that space. As a matter of fact, they came on board so that I could focus more on the customer side and step away as the CTO. So they became the CTO. We throughout this process, we actually became good friends, and developed a lot of trust for each other, and we realized that there's a problem space that Greg was working on for actually a very long time, and it was an important problem space. We validated the ideas, and now we're working on developing a security and management platform, but we're using a biological model to do that, and we're tying hardware into the software, into the application, and then into the end user experience as part of it. So we're really looking at technology as a whole and seeing what needs to happen for it to work really well together. And we do that because we both feel like, as a technology industry, as technology evolved, we've actually created a lot of fundamental debt because we tend to solve things organically. We tend to grow technology organically, and we tend to solve for the problems that we see, but we don't necessarily solve for the entire problem set by going back and asking ourselves, well, is this really what it was designed to do, and can we do it um, in a smoother, in a better way? So when we, as an industry, develop certain solutions, we take something, we make it better. Sometimes it's incrementally better. Sometimes we repurpose it to serve a different need because we see that need. And we end up with a whole bunch of vertical solutions. Like in the cybersecurity space, we do endpoint protection, which is separate from encryption, which is separate from data management, and encryption becomes a bolt-on. We do endpoint protection to secure the mobile device and the laptop, but all of these are separate. And none of them tie together super well. They kind of tie together because we made them tie together. So what we want to do is we want to take a step back, do away with fundamental debt that we've accrued, and really focus on driving the solutions in a more integrated fashion and address the future growth with AI, the prevalence of OT devices, and really look at how it can all work together in a better way. And of course, that biological model allows functions the same way as the body. We have antibodies for problems. We have antibodies for viruses. We have antibodies for all kinds of infections. And the human body is actually pretty good. Actually, anybody is pretty good at defending against it for the most part. So learning from that really allows us to reposition what we do and how we do it.
That's really interesting. Can you tell me where that concept came from of kind of taking the biological kind of mindset to be looking at technology and cybersecurity specifically?
Yeah, I have to credit Greg from for actually identifying the fact that we could treat it as a with a biological approach. We can really look at it that way. Um, we've got a lot of contributions. This comes from decades and decades of both of our work, both our work and both of our perspectives on how to do it, not only in go-to-market acceptance and adoption, but also what does technology need to look like and what it does and how we use it. So by taking both of our perspectives and really looking at the problem set, identifying the needs, and looking at that solution space that I keep talking about, I feel like a broken record a little bit. It really drives a deeper understanding. And then when we go to validate it with customers and partners, and they tell us where they've succeeded, where they failed, where they really see the need, and what they're willing to put behind that need, we tend to be able to position it in a way that that really would be very adoptable, very useful in the industry, and hopefully it will help people.
I like that. I think when a lot of people think of kind of the needs in the space and the consolidation, where people's mind goes is fewer tools and kind of better integration. And as you say, that's maybe fixing the problem in a more short-sighted way. So what you're doing sounds very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, people invest in things, right? They buy tools, they set them up, they do so many things to make them work better, and they have a heavy investment in time, resources, training, and so many other things. If we can create a platform that would make those things better, then there doesn't need to be a change necessarily, or they could, if the customer chooses to make that change, then they would have the ability to do that with better products and better things. And but at the end of the day, if we can make their existing products work better and help them achieve what they need to achieve, then why make the change?
Right, right. Well, it's a very strong value proposition, and I think in a space like security, that's always evolving and rapidly evolving, especially these days, having approaches like that make a lot of sense. So you have to keep making it better and finding kind of more streamlined solutions, but the onus is still on you to keep everything kind of protected and guarded in parallel.
Yeah, Natalie, you're absolutely right. We could not rest on our laurels because the attackers are well incentivized, and they're very smart. So we need to continue to evolve and better ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. That could be a whole separate conversation, but unfortunately, the problems aren't going anywhere, and the attackers are just getting more and more sophisticated and leaning on their own technology stack and innovations. So, yeah,
that's right.
So, Costa, I'd love to shift gears a bit, and we've talked about your companies and what you've done and how you've led transformations there. I'd love to hear a little bit about you. So, who is Kostya? How did you go from little Kostya when you were a boy to to where you are today? Did you know you were going to be a founder and CEO someday? Tell me a bit about yourself.
Oh, that's a fun one. So, I would say that I lived a non-standard childhood. I was born in Eastern Bloc, and we left as refugees when I was 10, and we um, went through a couple of hours in Warsaw, in Poland. I spent some time in Austria. Spent a bit of time in Italy, and finally moved to Australia and grew up there. And that was my home for a very long time. Went to school, went to uni there, and then moved to United States, the San Francisco area, when to rejoin our family because it was broken up, and a lot of my family, my immediate family, ended up in San Francisco. So eventually, my mom and I joined them, um, and kind of that's how it all started. I think it created a desire in me uh, to see the world in my own way, and to follow my own path and my own direction. When you're a kid in Italy who's trying to learn the language, you want to buy yourself a candy bar, or you want to buy yourself something, and so what do? You grab a bucket and a mop, and you go wash cars at a red light, and earn a little bit of money, and maybe buy yourself a camera. Or when you're a 12-year-old, you go and look for work, and I got lucky. I got to become a jeweler for about 12 years of my life. It took me all through school and college, university, um, where I got to work and create things and make things and learn how things fit together and work. And at the same time, I kept myself creative um, and useful, and a little bit of money doesn't hurt either when you're figuring it out. So that perspective kind of informs the way I look at things, the way I do things, um, and it just makes you want to work harder to achieve. Um, if that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a really interesting path that you took, right? You never know, I guess, where the journey will take you. But it's interesting. I know a number of entrepreneurs from the former Soviet Union, and I think there's a woman. I'm in entrepreneurs organization. A
Mhm.
woman, Jenny Fedorovich, that spoke. She's a kind of media entrepreneur and DJ on the side, and she spent some time in Italy before making it to the U.S. And has a little bit of a similar story, right? Selling kind of products and just getting very creative. And I think that creativity kind of breeds an entrepreneurial mindset. You're not necessarily thinking about that at the time, but it's a bit of that natural kind of inclination towards thinking about what do people need that I can bring them, right?
Exactly. Hunger is a good motivator.
Yep, for sure, for sure. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Pleasure.
I'm interested to talk a little bit more about, you talked about what you're doing at UnPwnAble and kind of the vision. I would imagine that, some of the clients that you're working with are going through their own transformations that would kind of help bring them to you and kind of make them a good fit to work with you. So can you talk a little bit about what do you think are the transformations or changes that your customers or ideal customers are going through?
Sure. So, I mean, I can talk about the industry in general. I think that might be a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Um, we're starting to evolve hardware, and we're starting to accelerate the way we do things at a technical level, well beyond what our capabilities are. And in some ways, it's driven by the fact that we've hit certain roadblocks. Um, and I refer specifically to ability to process information. Moore's law is oftentimes seen as it's come to an end. Moore's law states that we double our compute capacity every X amount of time. And every couple of years actually, and we're reaching some physical limitations there. But that does not mean that that it's true across all the ways that we compute. And that's very much evident with NVIDIA's latest push and ARM's latest processors and neural cores as well that they're designing. So we can process a lot more information. Quantum is very immature yet, but it's growing up and it's becoming a toddler, and soon it will be a teenager, and make itself useful as well. And it will allow us to do so much more still. By combining all of these technologies, we're actually unlocking the capabilities of AI slowly. Well, not that slowly. It's been very much in the news lately, and now we have yet another way of looking at how we're going to evolve, and as we stand on this precipice. So. Because of that, there is a huge push to understand what does AI mean and how does it work. And there is a huge push for how do you make it safe and how do you make it usable and useful, and how do you prevent the same adversaries that we've had before, both at nation state level and at financial or other types of disruptive attacks. How do you negate them in a more meaningful way? Because the technology has evolved, and the question comes down to: have we evolved our defenses sufficiently, or are we trailing? So, because of that, there is a lot of understanding that needs to happen in the industry, and there is a huge focus again on solving specific vertical problems in AI in other spaces. And so what Greg and I are doing is actually looking at what needs to happen fundamentally, and how do we drive value throughout the entire value chain. In other words, when the processor is designed, when it's made into a computer, when the computer is used for serving data, when a mobile device is being used for accessing data, all of that needs to continue to work together. So as we provide more benefits in the AI space and accelerate what we're able to do, we also need to make sure that we can do that acceleration safely and defend against things that are growing up in a biological model. I mean, AI itself is built and modeled after the brain, and it's built and modeled by people who've studied neurosciences and built a huge understanding and train it and to learn in a way that's similar to the way humans learn in many ways, not fully, but very similar indeed. So with those capabilities, we and that kind of exponential acceleration, we also need to make sure that, is our immune system strong enough to be able to address that, to withstand it, and can we act cooperatively? Can we ensure that there is beneficial use AI integrated into this platform? Can it defend against malicious use AI that's going to be directed at us by our adversaries, or events like singularities, or just plain old mistakes and errors in the way we build, or the way we train, or the way we build the models. So those are the things that we work on, and it resonates because we do a lot of validation. We speak to our customers. We inform our product design and our direction from that perspective. We continuously look for insights. What are they not saying? What are they needing? And so far, it seems to be something that's seen as very useful and with very broad applications.
Right. The way you talk about the openness to finding the right solution based on, like you said, the insights, the problems, I think that requires good vision and good leadership. which is much needed across the industry, but just in kind of the ecosystem at large. And on a slightly different topic, I'm curious on the topic of leadership. As you think about where you are now, what advice would you give your younger self in your first ever leadership role?
Listen more. Listen more would always be my first one. Young people tend to be very certain in themselves and what they learn, what they know. And listening is a tool that becomes so important. So listen more would be one of them. Trust but verify is a very good one as well, because it helps you avoid certain mistakes and really and the third one is always to continue to be inquisitive, to continue learning even when things are hard. Take a step back once in a while and learn, read, absorb information, see how it fits. Don't be certain in your own right, but continue to test your assumptions.
I think those are great ones, and we could have sat in a room together, and I would have benefited from hearing those as well back in the day. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, it helps to run headfirst into the wall a few times, doesn't it?
It does. It does. I sometimes say nobody learns from other people's mistakes. You sometimes have to learn from your own mistakes. But at the same time, having that introspection and taking that step back, in what you're doing and how you're thinking about things can be so beneficial. And I do think that's something that unfortunately often comes with time and years, and not kind of natural for everyone as they're getting started in their careers. So Kosta, before we wrap up, love this conversation. Thank you so much. Can you tell our listeners know where they can find you?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn, and I'll provide the link for you. It's Konstantin Vilk. I spell it with a K, no E at the end, and Vilk is spelled like milk, but with an E. I think that would be the easiest way to reach out to me, and otherwise through you. Great.
Thank you. Well, we'll add the links that you share to our show notes so people can look for that. Thank you so much. This was really a fantastic discussion.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And thank you to everyone who's listening. I know I loved hearing all the advice and insights that Kosta shared, the focus on kind of problem solving and finding those insights, and not always the ones that people know that they have. And really using that to bring complete solutions and working across the organization to do that. So thank you. And I know I learned a lot from today's discussion. If our listeners learned something, and I'm sure that you did, please tell someone about this episode. As we've been discussing, sharing knowledge and information is how we all get better for ourselves, for our organization. So I'll wrap with that. And thank you again, Kosta. And this has been another exciting episode of Shift and Thrive. See you all next time. That's a wrap for this week's episode. For show notes and more, visit shiftandthrivepodcast.com. A special thank you to our sponsor, Magnitude Consulting, bringing you the thinking power of a growth consultancy and the getting it done power of a full-service marketing agency to help B2B companies fuel their growth. For more information on Magnitude and to get your complimentary transformation readiness assessment, visit magnitudeconsulting.com/getready. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next week.